Hi, I'm Matt.
And now I'm Andrew.
Welcome to Waiting with Love. As always, this is a fellowship style space for people navigating the messy in between that comes with waiting. Whether you're waiting for a child, as we are, or waiting for something else, we want you to know that you don't have to wait without hope and you don't have to wait alone.
This is
This is
especially true when that waiting has lasted longer, hurt more, or changed you more than you expected.
If you've ever felt stuck in the middle of something you desperately want, you're in the right place.
Thank you for being here. All right, we are back. Thank you all so much for listening, following us on our website, our social media, our Substack. Everything is growing. Again, that's the best way to have more impact is to have more and more followers and spreading the word. So we really appreciate everyone for doing that. So Matt, it is almost spring. The days
It
are getting
is.
longer. It's getting lighter. I'm feeling happier. So I thought we could have a little bit of a more lighter episode today, a little bit more fun episode today. We've been talking a lot about how it's difficult for people to express their interest, concern, and thoughtfulness with us by asking us questions. And we've talked about how sometimes those questions have an unintended consequence of making us feel like shit, to be perfectly blunt, which is not the intent, of course, but that's tends to be what happens. So we thought today we would go through some of our most common questions we get that are coming from the right place, from the right people, but are often inconsiderate or, dare I say, rude. And we're going to talk about why that's the case and then give you an alternative that you could ask. This way, there's also something you can take away from this that's actually productive. And again, these are probably good suggestions in all facets of life, in all facets of friendship and family. These are not just like necessarily fertility related, but if you know you have friends and loved ones going through ordeals or challenges, I think this can be helpful for you.
I
What
think
do you
so
think,
too.
Matt?
I think so too. Ready to get started?
Let's get started. You want to do the first one?
Yeah, so let's start with my absolute favorite. Enter sarcasm. So, Andrew, any updates? Has there been any progress on the baby journey? How's your adoption going?
Oh, how's your adoption going? Is everyone's favorite. Oh, they love that one. I don't know what it is about that one, but they love that one. Okay, yes. Any updates? What's going on? It's been a while, right? How's the adoption going? Is there a baby coming anytime soon? Any facet of that, right? Yeah. So why is that inconsiderate? Well, number one, it implies there are updates. And as we've talked about, as anyone who's had fertility issues, a lot of times it's literally watching paint dry. These things take a very, very long time.
Hmm.
Um, and there are a lot of times there's no updates. And that's not because nobody's trying or it's just the way it is, unfortunately. Why does that negatively impact us? So again, it's annoying besides, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was going to just add, I think the other aspect for me as to why that's an inconsiderate question is it also is a little bit presumptive on the part of the person asking that suggests that we owe you an update,
Oh, that's a good point. That's a very
right?
good point.
Like as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the less questions you ask, number one, the more that we're likely going to share with you. But I think it's a presumptive question because it puts us a little bit on your back foot in a defensive mode that suggests that I owe you some sort of an update. And I think it's also inconsiderate because it assumes that you thought that we were not going to tell you something important. I mean, if Andrew and I were having a baby tomorrow, number one, I don't think we would have started this podcast. But if you're close to us in our close circle of friends or family, I think it's an inconsiderate question because do you really think that we would not have shared an update like that?
Right. Right. I think people might assume that we're going to be due in a month and we're just hiding it. And as you said, that's not the case. We wouldn't be doing this if it was. I mean, I think now we would be because we started far in advance. But, if we were just a few weeks away when we started this podcast, I don't think we would have started the podcast. We'd be busy. Right. So
Right.
And yeah, it's like, and one of the, I think people get frustrated with us that we don't tell them very much about this process. But we're doing a lot of the reason we do that is just so you don't feel like you need to ask for updates or anything like that. Like, I think it'd be rude of us if we told you things like we told you about every embryo transfer or about every birth mother or about whatever, and then didn't tell you anything. I don't afterwards, and didn't give you updates. That would kind of be rude, in my opinion. You know. So in fact, we kind of decided we've told the people. Well, now we've told everybody with this podcast who's interested. But before the podcast, we told our close friends and family that we were going to try again when we decided to do surrogacy after adoption, and we'll let you know when there's some real news. But we didn't tell them anything else. But not to be rude, but because again, we didn't want to do the status updates and to keep things fair, honestly. It wouldn't be fair for us to give them a minute by minute playbook and then all of a sudden just stop giving updates. Mhm.
Yeah, and I think that parlays nicely into where I think you were going, Andrew, which is, how does this negatively impact us? And I think for me, it turns waiting into failure because having to give somebody an update saying there is no update or I don't have anything to share at this time makes a cumbersome process feel even more cumbersome because the only thing worse than I would say giving a bad update is giving no update, right? We've talked a lot
Yeah.
on this podcast about the need to control. And when you're in this circumstance, whether it's through IVF adoption or surrogacy, there's so much that you can't control that I think it turns a question like that so open ended. Hey, are there any updates? If the answer is we don't have any updates, or we don't have any meaningful update that's going to impact you if I share it or not share it, it starts to feel like a status report and it starts to feel a little bit like failure, which, if you're going through this process as we are, that can hurt as much as a negative update, and in some cases, even more.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, I think it just comes back to if you're somebody who is in the close circle of trust, a family friend of somebody who's going through this process or some kind of fertility process at the moment, they did not forget to give you an update. I can assure you. They're not in the third trimester. Oh shit! I forgot to tell my mother. I don't think that's what's happening, right? So just it's not a great question because nothing's good coming out of it. But there is an alternative that you can ask, um, and it's basically being there, and it's basically reminding people you're being there by asking something along the lines of, "Hey, you told me 6 months ago you were starting this process. We know it's a long, arduous journey, and we wanted you to know we were thinking about you. How are you holding up?"
Yeah.
And I
And
bet
part
you
of
if you,
why
oh,
I was going to say, part of why I love that revised approach. I've been thinking about you. How are you doing these days? People are very uncomfortable with silence. And I get it. But I also, both through my personal experience and for what I do for work, I realize how valuable silence can be. And I think we talked a little bit last week about the recovery world. I just came back from a recovery meeting, and those meetings are always an hour long. They're never shorter than an hour, and if they're longer than an hour, you better believe whoever's chairing that meeting is going to know that they went over. But that that silence of holding space for someone, the reason that a better alternative is I've been thinking about you. How are you doing these days? Stop and let there be silence. And let Andrew, let me, let your loved one take the conversation from there. And I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't read social cues. I mean, if it was me and I didn't feel like sharing, I would say, "Oh, I'm fine." And then I would probably go to like unload the dishwasher. And anybody who knows me knows if I don't want to talk about something, I distract myself.
yeah, absolutely. And again, you made as to kind of piggyback off of Matt, and Matt, this might have to be a two-parter of this episode because we're still in question one. That's okay. As you can all tell, this is an important subject for us. Some days we may be talkative, some days we may not be, and that's okay. But the friends that know more than others, are the ones who ask the questions like that. And some days we unload a little bit. Yeah, we had an embryo transfer a few weeks ago, or whatever it is, or yeah, we got a good report on our embryos, or yes, right. That's actually, you actually have a better chance of getting somewhat of a status update by framing the question about how we are doing, and then we may talk it through, and we may not, and that's okay too.
Yeah,
But
and I also think, a question like that, silence from the person who's asked the question doesn't necessarily mean that there is no progress. It may also be, and I think this is relevant right now, that whoever you've asked that question to who's going through this journey is waiting on an important update and is reserving the right to speak about where they're at in this journey because they know that in a week or in 2 weeks, they might have a more material update. So they may be
let's just
punting not because there
let's
isn't progress.
well, let's make this universal, Matt. Anybody who's trying to have kids, even the traditional way, if they've been trying and it's time to take a pregnancy test and they're going to get the results in a day or two for the beta test,
Mhm.
um, can you imagine asking that person for a status update 2 days before? How much they must be feeling?
That's exactly my point. Is
Like
is
they're
somebody
already
might
probably on
be
knife's edge. They're probably already like on knife's edge, and all you're doing is reminding them that they're on knife's edge, and like that's the point we're trying to make.
exactly. Exactly. Okay, I think we beat that to death. Next question, Andrew. Why does it take so long? I don't understand what's taking so long. You've been trying for whatever, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, 10 years. Doesn't matter. Why does it take so long?
Yeah, I know. I was just asking. I went to Shabbat services Friday night, and I was asking God that question. Him and I went back and forth in the. Are you? What a dumb question that is. And my apologies up above for using your name. Anyway,
I'll
but
email
that's the
biology and ask.
right. I'll email biology. I'll ask my Lord and Savior. I mean, I don't know. Like, it's just why is it taking so long? Why can't a surrogate just say, I want to be your surrogate and just do it? Like, just do it. And why can't that uterus just accept the embryo and just make it perfect? There
Right.
is so much to go behind the scenes. And this is where, again, if you want to be helpful, and again, we're talking about surrogacy right now, but in any facet of trying to have kids or fertility, you want to help your friends and loved ones. It's instead of asking that kind of question, do some research. Somebody who is a very close family member of mine, I'm not going to say who, because I'm going to behave, asked me literally 48 hours ago how the adoption is going.
We are not
And this
currently
person
going through
knows her
the
true.
adoption process.
Right. This person knows we did go through the adoption process for like 4 or 5 years and didn't work. And we had a lot of heartbreak and trauma with that, and knows that we're not doing adoption now. So instead of asking stupid questions, how about dive into surrogacy and become an expert at it? So when I do want to open up to you, you know how to respond. That'd be a better way. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. Let's go back to the question. Why is this taking so long? The other thing it implies, the problem with that question is it implies the length is because of like inefficiency or incompetency, but maybe we had two miscarriages and we didn't feel like sharing that
Yeah.
with everybody.
Yeah.
I hate to make it that hard, but like maybe that's what happened. Maybe we had a stillbirth. Maybe a million things. Um, it's a very inconsiderate question because you're not asking it thinking of that. You're asking it because you're assuming our agency something up and they're just not taking care of you. But that also implies incompetence in our part that we didn't do our due diligence
Yeah.
on agencies and things like
Well,
that. Now,
I,
yeah,
I think it also, particularly if this is coming from a family member and not a friend or an associate that you work with, I think number one, it subtly suggests that we're not moving fast enough in this process for you and for the personal gains that you will receive out of this process. And number two, it suggests that, to your point that you just made, Andrew, don't understand enough about the process, which is governed by both, if we talk about surrogacy medically, and if we talk about both surrogacy and adoption and IVF, law. Like there is medicine
right.
and law at play in these circumstances. And the surrogacy process, as a perfect example, is both medicine and law. You have a little bit less law in surrogacy than you do in adoption. But as we suggested on previous podcasts, we're doing surrogacy in another country. So it's not just this country's laws, it's another country's laws.
Well, and so just to get to the, I guess, A plus B equals C part of this, there no, for surrogacy, you're sending an embryo, you're transferring an embryo into another woman's uterus. They're not going to do that unless everything is perfect. And if it's not perfect, you have to wait a month for the next cycle, which happens all the time.
Yeah.
So there's just so much that goes in there, right? So, and again, an alternative question you can ask is basically the same as the last question. You've told, wow, Andrew and Matt or whoever,
Mm,
you told us about a year ago you started this process. It's taking a while. How are you two feeling? How are you two holding up? It must be a lot on you two. How could I help?
yeah.
Something very
And
simple and open like that.
I think that alternative acknowledges reality without assigning blame. It just
Yes,
says, hey, this is taking a while. How are you doing?
right. And that's when somebody might open up. And there are people in our lives who know more about our journey than others because they phrase the questions that way. So let's continue, but same kind of topic or kind of next, like the natural progression. Why is it taking so long? The next question we usually get, which we've gotten many times. Are you sure, Matt, your clinic is good? It's in another country. It's their world. They probably aren't, let's be honest, it's not America. You know,
No,
um,
we
is your
we
agency
actually
good?
we actually picked it based on vibes. I went to two different websites and one of them was orange and the other was blue, and I prefer blue over orange, so
He's
we picked
lying.
the
He's
orange
lying.
agency.
He's lying. The clinic we chose, the doctor's way cuter, so we went with that one. Um, right.
Yeah, I think it's inconsiderate because it questions our judgment after months of research and not only emotional investment, but financial investment. It assumes that we did not go through our due diligence process, which could include a variety of things. I mean, if I take this back to adoption for a second, our first adoption agency went bankrupt. We invested every single dollar that we had in savings into an agency that also went bankrupt. Do you
And
think that
before,
we haven't pressed to the
yep,
point of nauseum to every agency we've worked through since then about their financial viability?
yep. And even that first one, maybe we should have done more homework, but that agency was one of the oldest ones that dealt with gay couples 10 years ago, which there weren't that many back then. And they've been around forever. They were national. So, I mean, what other questions really could we be asked? Are your finances in order? Will you show us your books? They're going to say no, of course. And so it's like, even so, to Matt's point, we learned some lessons, but also we were never that stupid either, if that makes sense. There's only
Yeah.
so much you can ask, right?
Yeah.
And let's kind of just to keep things moving, Matt, because the next question is basically the same thing. Um, Fine, maybe you did some research and the clinic is okay, it's good, but like, why aren't they trying any harder? Why aren't they moving faster?
Yeah, I think this is a question that even us going through this process, we ask ourselves this question all the time, and we ask the agency this question all the time. And I think it's a delicate balance. I mean, as you said, Andrew, and we talked about this a little bit last week, there's a lot of steps involved. There's a lot of things that have to work perfectly, and there's a lot of criteria that need to be met. I mean, in the case of surrogacy, as you just said, Andrew, they are not going to, I'm going to use this term and some people aren't going to like it, but I'm going to say the agency is not going to waste an embryo on something that they don't feel completely confident has a good chance of success. And I hate to use the word waste, but anybody going through IVF or surrogacy knows creating embryos is expensive.
It's
It is an
expensive, it's time
expensive
consuming,
process. It's a
it's
time
not
consuming
it's not
process.
guaranteed success. So if you're not, most agencies are not guaranteed. So if you invest all this money to do IVF and have embryos created, it might not work,
Right.
and then you got to pay for it
And
again.
and I think again it's people looking to control something. People are looking for someone to blame. But I think by asking a question like why aren't they trying harder, they're trying as hard as they can. and we're trying as hard as we can. And I will say, to the credit of our current agency, who, again, we will not name, lately we've been feeling a little bit stuck, and we pushed them to try harder. And I am confident that they are trying as hard as they can. And as we talked about last week, they are pulling the levers that are available to them without sacrificing from a perspective of medical quality. And I'm going to leave it right there.
No, I think that's great. So things you could ask that's sort of related about the agency. Again, if you're doing adoption or surrogacy or the clinic, depends what depends what you're working on. Um, is really try to affirm, more like it sounds like you've done your research. It sounds like you've done your homework. It sounds like they're trying their best. A lot of this is out of your hands and, it takes time. So, I'm sure you did your homework. Just kind of reaffirming because I think the other thing that we maybe not have hit hard is sometimes when I'm sure you could all relate to this. Sometimes if people ask these questions or make these statements like, are they trying their hardest? Are you sure you picked the right one? You start self-doubting your decisions, like, right? Like,
Hmm.
oh, shit,
Yep.
maybe my friend is right. Maybe we didn't do our homework. Maybe we should have waited another year and did some more research. Maybe we should have done this instead of that. And we start self-doubting ourselves when we're already in a very fragile emotional spot on a very fragile emotional topic. So again, what the intention is to help, what you're really doing is putting more mental grief into us, which I know is not the intent, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Andrew, how many tries are you going to do? How long is this going to go on? At a certain point, are you going to age out of the process?
And let's just combine this one with the next one, Matt. Maybe we'll wrap it up there for this week, and then we'll
Sure.
do a second round of this next time. Have you ever thought about just stopping? It's taking a while. Like you guys must be,
Hmm.
fried. So let's kind of combine the two. So, how many tries are you gonna do? Yeah, it's like, I'm just gonna keep trying, you get credit card points each time you pay for it, so it's great. I get free vacations out of this.
I
What's the difference,
wish.
right? Oh, have you ever thought about stopping? Oh my God, I never thought of that. Oh, thank you, friend and family. Oh, we could just be done with this and just stop at any moment. You're brilliant. I can't believe we never thought about this, Matt. Except we have stopped before and took many breaks, and yet
Yeah.
always come back to this. It's almost like it's something we just really want to do. We don't really want to stop, but you know, but thank you. We never thought about that. So let's kind of dissect this a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
I think there's a couple of realities here. I mean, the first reality that we face and people in similar circumstances to us face is, let's talk about money for a second. I mean, all of these processes are very front loaded in terms of the money that you pay. And that is not to mean that if you reach a point that you mentally, emotionally, physically cannot continue going through this process, that you shouldn't choose to stop. But money is a factor. And we have front loaded payments, both in adoption, which we're not even pursuing anymore, and in surrogacy. But I think the other reality is for us, because we've been through a couple of stops and starts, you're not going to know that you're done until you are. And I also think from our own experience, especially with adoption, when we chose to stop, I think of it kind of like the moment that you decide in your head that you're going to quit your job, you're going to quit that job. You're done. You're mentally done. And to me, the reason that that question isn't a great question is we're not going to know that we're done until we're done. And that could be tomorrow. That could be 10 more years from now. But we're not going to know the answer to that. There's no number. It's not like Andrew and I entered into this journey and said, after 5 tries, we're done.
no, I talked about a break, and what I don't want to do is people listening to this who are literally thinking about stopping and feeling guilty about that. You shouldn't, because again, when we took I keep calling it a break now, but when we stopped that before COVID for for a couple of years, maybe subconsciously we both thought maybe this is not for good, but certainly to each other out of our mouths, was we are done. Like this was not a break, you know?
Hmm.
And we couldn't do it anymore. It was mentally killing us, financially killing us. At that point, we were handling the grief and the setbacks in non-healthy ways. Matt talked about recovery, you know, so you can all think about that. You could all put that together. Um, we had to stop. We just could not continue at that point. Now we're in a better spot. And the plan right now is to continue until it's done, you know, but as Matt said, there may be a point. We don't know when that will be. Um, would our
Yeah.
lives financially be easier tomorrow if we stopped? Of course it would be, but that's anybody who wants to have kids. Nobody's ever said having kids is a good financial investment,
Right.
no matter how you're having kids, right? So, I mean, the there is no intent to stop, but you know, if there is, it might happen. Who knows when that's going to be? What you can do instead? Oh, go ahead.
Nope. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, what you can ask instead or say instead is, this must be very hard. It's been very long. It's out of your hands. You know, try to do what you guys can to live day by day and let me know how I can help with that. Something very simple like that, you know?
Yeah. Or I think just affirming, as we talked about
Hmm.
before, look, this has been a long journey and it's a journey that I can see your commitment to. How can I help you to continue to go through this journey? If this is what you want to do, you have my support. How can I help you?
Hmm. I love that.
So
Love that.
I think that brings us to a good point. I think, we'll definitely follow up with part two to this, but I do want to wrap up with, we understand that most of these questions aren't malicious, but I think if you're walking through something that's uncertain, whether it's medical, emotional, expensive, or deeply personal, even natural questions that are well intended can start to feel like pressure. And
Yeah.
hopefully this, yeah, go ahead.
No, I had kind of an aha moment just now that I want to say as a wrap up before we leave. If y'all notice the funny, not funny, but the questions that we kind of found insulting or rude or whatever, you know, if you notice, most of the alternatives we provided you all were not questions, they were statements,
Yeah.
right? Like instead of asking how much longer you're going to try, you could say something along the lines of, "You've been trying for a very long time. What can we do for you? How can we support you? How, you know, instead of
Mhm.
asking, is your agency any good? Are they trying hard enough? You could say something along the lines of, you know, you two are very smart. I'm sure you did your homework, but it still must be very stressful, right? You notice it's not questions; it's more the alternative is statements, and I think that helps too because questions make and think about yourselves. Questions make you defensive, you know. Statements are more warm.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was my aha
Agreed.
moment.
I like it. So if you love somebody who's trying to build a family, I think key messages today, don't try and solve it. Don't try and analyze it. Don't try and put a timeline on it. Just say, I'm here and hold some space. And I think people will open up to you a lot more. Thanks so much for listening. We will follow
Thanks,
up with
everyone.
a part two in a couple of weeks. Thank you for being here. If this episode resonates with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to know that they're not alone.
You can find more about us and this community at www.waitingwithlove.com.
And links to our socials, as always, are in the show notes.
Until next time, keep waiting with love.